Do you remember the TV show Lost? As with most things in life, I'm a middle adopter. So I jumped in around season 3, binge watched the first 2 seasons on iTunes and was hooked until the end. One of my favorite things about the show was what they called Easter eggs. Nothing fed my interest for the show or need to rewatch episodes than the hidden content and clues that the creators inserted to foreshadow things to come or connected with things that had happened. Of course, they're all over different shows and series now. A great example is in the Marvel movies. Tony Stark picking up Captain America's shield in Iron Man 2 before we're ever introduced to Captain America. I'm not going to suggest the book of Acts is filled with Easter eggs. That might be a confusing metaphor to maintain. But I will suggest there's some details that Luke has inserted into his narrative that a quick read through of the text might lead us to miss out on. Earlier in chapter 1, we read, leaving the next day, we reached Caesarea and stayed at the house of Philip the evangelist, one of the 7. He had 4 unmarried daughters who prophesied. Why does Luke add the detail of Philip's 4 unmarried daughters or their prophetic gifting? It seems an extraneous detail, or does it connect back and demonstrate fulfillment of Peter's quotation of Joel? Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. What about the comment regarding Nason in verse 16 that he was a man from Cyprus and one of the early disciples? Perhaps that, combined with the reference to Philip and the welcome they received from James, it was to demonstrate continuity. Remember, Paul was showing up at Pentecost, and while things had changed a great deal since the first Pentecost spoken of in chapter 2, and Paul had not gone off the rails. They were still in alignment. Perhaps that quotation in verse 25, as for the Gentile believers, we have written to them our decision that they should abstain from food sacrificed from idols, from blood, from the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality. What are they doing? They're reiterating the position they took, commending Paul's ministry at the Jerusalem Council. Now, in the midst of all of these continuities and connections, there's one thing curious. Luke's account is absent mention of the collection for the Jerusalem church. In Romans, Paul writes, I am on my way to Jerusalem in the service of the Lord's people there. For Macedonia and Achaia were pleased to make contribution for the poor among the Lord's people in Jerusalem. He mentions the collection in both 1st and 2nd Corinthians. I suggested back in the beginning of Acts 20 that the reason that Paul had so many traveling companions was to ensure the security of the offering and their legitimate desire to be a part of its giving. This was not an ancillary ministry, but Paul considered it critical. Yet when we get to Acts 21, the details regarding its distribution are non-existent. The scholars are divided as to why. Some think it was rejected, and Luke considered it too embarrassing to include. Others think it was accepted, but did not have the impact Paul hoped. Others contend that since Paul's actions in Jerusalem were interrupted by the riot and his arrest, he wasn't officially able to offer the gift. I'm inclined to lean on that interpretation. Now, regardless of where we come down, it's clear that the leaders of the church recognized Paul's apostolic ministry. Regardless of any other accomplishment in his arrival in Jerusalem, he was following the leading of the Spirit and modeling the likeness of our Lord. And there are areas in our lives that we will deem important, critical even, that will draw silence, a whimper, maybe even outright rejection. And the point is not our success, but whether we are following the Spirit's leading and modeling the likeness of our Lord in all we do. In second thought, success does matter. Perhaps it's just that that following the Spirit's leading and modeling the likeness of our Lord is actually the measure for that success. May that be our pursuit. Have a blessed week.